Three, two, one. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of On the Long with FVR. Today we have Norris Mukembe. How are you doing, man?
I'm well, thanks. How are you? And how's everyone?
Everybody has been very fine. They've been commenting that they want more videos, more content. So we wanted to see if you had the opportunity to share your journey and how has been everything going on for you.
My journey to Malaysia?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been well. I think it took me a while to adjust. I come from South Africa, so the journey. I think I was fortunate enough to get all my administration and stuff done early. So the journey was just a matter of booking a ticket and flying into here. It was a bit of a challenge. Had a 14-day. The time it was the height of the pandemic in Malaysia, so I had to quarantine for 14 days. Made it onto campus, and then had a further 2 or so months of just classes on Zoom. And but slowly we started to find our groove, make friends. We were able to go out, see the city a little bit. So it's been progressive. It's been I think a smooth journey overall.
That's very nice to hear because there has been stories that people trying to come here and they face roadblocks like there is an immigration ban based on your passport or based on things that were not happening back in the day. But in the end, things are like a smoothing, opening the doors, which is very important.
Yeah.
Very important. And more people are coming, which is always welcoming, especially right now that there is a new year and new adventures to come ahead. So talking about adventures, I believe that before this you had another adventure before. You were doing something with finance, something with engineering.
Oh, okay. So you mean like with my career? I would say it was a bit of an adventure. I started off. Well, let me start from the beginning. Started off at law school. Um, Finished my law. Did my undergrad in law, and then I was just not keen on getting into the industry. I think I had known since about my third year that it wasn't the career for me. But in the midst of all that confusion, I knew I didn't want to be a lawyer, but I actually didn't know what I wanted to do. But I just thought, I just finished. And towards the end of that journey, I ended up in the aviation industry. So I was doing business development for an engineering firm that basically focused on designing airfield runways.
Okay.
So
what are those?
Okay, so airfield runways think of an airport like this. It's two sides. There's the passenger side, which is the terminal, everything you know. And then there's the runway side, which is basically where you take off.
Okay.
Yeah, so the company did basically got all those lights that the pilots see and that you see when you're coming and landing in. They designed that whole thing from the runway to the electronics of it, to how you automate it, to how it flows, even to how you taxi the airplane right into where the passengers get out. So they provided turnkey solutions. They provided, maintenance. They provided overall. They did everything in the supply chain with regards to the air side. So, and my role there was I was in business development. So I got to do a little bit of traveling. Would go to countries, be on airports, be on airport runways, and be in the midst of the airport economy, which is basically the inner workings of what makes an airport work. So the larger the airport, the more complexities there are, and it's really an economy. Everything connects. It's a well-run machine. You have duties, roles. You have devices. You have this. You have the air traffic control, which you have maintenance teams. If there's a pothole on the runway, someone has to come fix it. Fix it up before you get heavy traffic. So there's all these little complexities that whole new world that I had not known about, because before then you just go get onto the airport and you're thinking about your destination.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a fun time.
It's very fascinating you mentioned about the economy of an airport because It's not the same an airport for a population of 4 million people
Yes.
than an airport for a 40 million people.
Yes.
It's totally different the scale, right?
Yes. So I would put it to you like this. When we measure populations of airports, we're measuring passengers that go through and not really the wider population. So you would find, like, for example, in a country like Malaysia that has a population of about, I stand corrected, between 30 to 40 million people, probably 36 million people, because of its geographical location, they could have a high turnover of passengers, right? So then that airport, I say conservatively, could have, without COVID, probably seeing 40, 50 million passengers a year. The same with an airport like Bangkok, even more so, maybe 100 million passengers with an airport like Changi in Singapore. So because of all those people going through that place and flying out and transiting and all of these other things, you're very right. What the amount of passengers that a small airport takes is totally different, and the economy is totally different to one of an airport which is maybe considered a hub, like a Changi.
That's why they call themselves local airports and hubs.
And hubs, that's correct.
Exactly. For people that is watching right now in Latin America, they will remember that Panama Airport is the hub of the Americas.
Yeah.
It's because of that magnitude and that scale going across the continent.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So when did you realize it was time to get more skills beyond airport management?
I won't lie, I really, really enjoyed the airport industry. It was a sad day when I had to leave it. I had mixed emotions. It's one of the, I think, I always encourage people who want to get into aviation. It's one of the most, I think, career rewarding. It's a fulfilling career being in aviation, in whatever part, But I think at that time I'm an entrepreneur at heart. So at that time, while I was working in the airport industry, I had what we'd call a side hustle, just working with taxation. So in law school, I picked up a knack for being able to see what the pros and cons, and just really getting to know tax regime and also immigration regimes. So I was a migrant, and for me, close to my heart was just always knowing what my rights and what the law said about your rights to, whether paying taxes as an immigrant, whether your right to stay, right to reside, all of those things. So I picked that up in law school, and I found myself in a situation where people would always ask me either about taxes or about immigration. So on the side, I would give a lot of tax advice, and then on a trip to New York, I met with some friends who were actually U.S. immigration attorneys who gave me introduced me to the wider industry of immigration by investment, and showed me a little bit about what they do. And they needed, personally, I think they needed a person in Africa to help them out with some of the things. And I thought, look, this is something I do. It's within my skill set, and I'd help them with that. And that business started to grow. I wasn't aware of that time, but I'd say I found myself in a niche of a rapidly growing industry at the time, and I became like the go-to person for companies or investors or clients abroad, and linking them to investors and clients within Africa, helping them understand the tax regime, helping high net worth individuals understand legacy planning, helping high net worth individuals understand the complexities of financial migration. So when you migrate, you move physically, but you also have to move your assets around the world. Either you sell or all of those complexities of, how do you trigger capital gains tax? Start going into jargon, etc., etc. So that business started to take off, and I couldn't pick between the two. I couldn't balance. So I had to make an informed decision that this was new, and it probably needed me a little bit more, and I could live from it. So there wasn't a risk of being harmed with my stability, in terms of my stability. So then I decided to start my tax advisory.
That's
an
a good
advisor.
story.
Yeah.
Now, there was two words that many people will like to ask you a little more.
Yeah.
Legacy planning. What
Yes.
is that?
So legacy planning
You
is,
plan on the legacy, you plan on the dynasty, or is totally different?
I'd say it's different and exactly what you think. I think we call it dynasty when you have a lot more cogs in the wheel. As in, you want to plan for not only your passing, but you want to make sure that it survives from maybe 3 or 4 generations after you. So you do have families and family offices that deal with that kind of complexity of investing the family wealth, looking into the trajectory of 2, 3, 4 generations. And simple legacy planning would just be wills, what you've accumulated now, taking care of your kids, making sure that they're all right. How you plan your personal financial planning, how you think about or how you reckon with you know how your assets would be divided and maybe even accumulated by your bequeath to your kin after you're gone. So all of that was legacy planning. So we would help clients with their wills. We would help clients with just figuring it out, like, okay, what the different complexities within their families, what structures would work, what structures might not work. Helping them figure out what exactly do they want. So yeah, that's basically legacy planning.
That's quite um, a new door that many people would like to know more about this because
Yeah.
sometimes the shortcoming that we have in lifetime is that it's only for us. And then we realize we have kids, we have grandkids, and generations to come.
Yeah.
Very few firms actually specialize on the wealth generation
Yes.
across, let's say, families or even across borders.
Yes.
Talking about borders and talking about traveling,
Yeah.
you mentioned that you have been in many parts,
Yeah.
but which has been the main difference you saw from the last part you were to here, the Southeast Asia?
The main difference I'd say is culture. I think culture is the main difference. I come from a culture where everybody is a lot more upfront, a lot less reserved, and a lot more in your face. Whereas here the style is more reserved. People are not as talkative, and it's just a different way of doing things. I wouldn't say there's a right or wrong way, but it's a different way. So, and I think it's really just the culture. The culture here is a more reserved culture. I found advantages with it, but I've also found times where I've struggled also to fit in, because I'm sure the guests can have seen I'm a very outspoken, um, say it as it is, opinionated guy. But in Asia, that takes people aback sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I realized that also that sometimes it's like, okay, it's the fair value that I give it to you. It's like, this is the honesty that I can give to this, an opinion that it can be straightforward and you can take it as it is.
Yes.
And then you, as a free human, you are free to take it or leave it. And then days pass by and it's going to be a new day, a new story. Because then we have the other side, people that will take it on the wrong momentum of the conversation and take it as a grudge, and it's like, no, there is no such a grudge. It's just a comment and that's it. Let's keep moving forward. Talking about moments, I remember right now that we discussed the legacy planning and watching your NBA jersey from Giannis Antetokounmpo. I remember this comment from Dr. Shaquille O'Neal mentioning that he is the one who is rich, but his kids needs to work for it.
Yeah.
So this is sometimes a little outside of the narrative of the legacy planning, but it's also a good way to say, hey, to your kids, you better get the skills and your discipline to get your things together.
Yes. Yeah. So I think it's a popular school of thought amongst I would say, without putting a label on it, I'd say that kind of skill of thought comes from when You have first generational wealth from someone who's been lucky in life to accumulate a large a large personal wealth, like Shaquille O'Neal, for example. And I think what the thinking behind it is they don't want their kids to get into the trappings of wealth, basically be spoiled. And as much as legacy planning is about fifth, fourth generation, it's really the capacity of the generations to be able to pass on that wealth. And if they're not ready for it, if they don't see the value in the wealth, if they don't possibly see how it's kept and how it's built and how it's re-engineered and regrown and also passed on to them, if there's no understanding of that, unfortunately, you get into a place where you get to the third generation and the family is right back where they started, and you have stories of, well, we had a rich grand uncle who was so and so. So that school of thought comes from the fear that of leaving your wealth to an incompetent bunch or an incompetent second generation. There are those also who want to prepare them, maybe not as harsh, maybe not as vocal, but they really look at preparing the second generation into just how to maintain. There may be I don't have the statistics to back it, but those are, I think, I would assume that those are more than those who would say, the self-made millionaires would say, well, you're only getting 1% of the billions and billions. Those are, I'd say, outliers within the curve of what legacy planning would be, in that term, with regards to that.
It's a good perspective that you mentioned, because outliers can go as far as the trend itself they are compared to.
Yes.
Because those outliers can also be trends of a different curve. And when we mention about billionaires and wealth, sometimes we forget to compare between the public wealth and the private wealth.
Yeah.
So much criticism between people who are in the public wealth, but there is not so much into the private wealth. Most likely in the private wealth, they are mostly doing this, like getting the generations ready for the next hit, the next market, or the next opportunity.
Yeah.
And that is not widely discussed today. Maybe what was not discussed generations ago, but it's encouraging to start discussing this now.
Yeah.
As things are moving forward. Talking about moving forward, 2022, what is the vision you have for this year? What is going to be like the good things or the bad things or things that people should be prepared for?
With regards to finances or just planning?
Yeah, what have you seen that you think, maybe that's something that people should start discussing now?
I think my personal opinion about 2022, I personally think we're at the tail end of the pandemic. I think two outcomes, this is just me, not a futurist, but so no one quote me and make any decisions on it, just a disclaimer.
Yeah, this is not a financial
advice.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think we're at the tail end of the pandemic. And I think going through what we went through the past 2 years, I personally believe it's really a time for us to take risks. I have concerns about how much governments have, flooded a lot of markets with just money. So there's a lot of money going around, which means a lot of inflation, which means that there should be in the future some market regulation. Things are not as they seem or as great as they seem. It's been artificially made to look like we are all right. You look at the markets now. A lot of the markets don't make sense with just what's going on in the world. You look at consumer demand, and sometimes you look at the valuation of companies, and you're like, it's insane. How are the markets doing well when, in real terms, you see it that the economy isn't doing so great? So with that, I think there's always an opportunity for people to always be. Well, my own opinion is I want to be a risk taker 2022, calculated risks. It's a year for those who know what they know to expand on what they know, to go outside a little bit outside the box, And I'd say to really invest the resources, and if you're one of those that were lucky to have access to income, PPE loans, or be protected, to really invest in things that are really concrete and tangible that you can manage, assets that you can manage. You've got the money to buy real estate upfront, cash, and you're in that you're one of the fortunate few to do that. Go ahead and do it. If you want to start businesses and side hustles, go ahead and do it. So I really think it's towards the tail end of the pandemic. We're going to have a lot of markets pick up, a lot of markets crash, but I think it's a time that everyone should be possibly experiment. That's just my personal perspective on
It is, and it feels, and most of people right now will be also commenting that we can see it, like almost 22 months into the crisis. Then we will start to think about ourselves. Emergencies are not supposed to last this long.
Yes.
It's time to move on, time to take what we have and start experimenting, start taking actions, start taking risks. Like all those that were postponed, all of a sudden, it's time to make it. It's time to
If I
do that.
can use an analogy from personal financial planning, we'd always advise clients that always have about 10 or 15% of your salary, or even a month, 3 months of your salary, 10, 15% of your annual salary or your net worth, or 3 months of your salary in an emergency fund. Now, what happens if the emergency lasts 2 years, like this pandemic? A lot of people ran out of their emergency funds within the fourth month of the pandemic. We now going into 2 years. In some countries, this is the third, fourth lockdown. So a lot of us are in corners, and I think even the mentality's changed. We've seen a lot more people. The situation itself has forced us to be more risk takers. Because in the absence of that, what do you have to lose? We are really at a place where it's what do you have to lose?
Yes. Sometimes when you say, what else can you lose when you have nothing else to lose? Those are the ones that you should be aware. Like, they are going to go all in. Like something that we learned recently about the strategy, like the hard strategy, the hard commitment.
Yes.
Because they are going to go full in.
Yes.
And the only way to stop that is either doing the same or coming out with a different strategy to contain it.
Yeah.
Talking about the strategies, and people may think about, like, okay, between all these other regions that right now are opening or closing around the world, why people should think that Southeast Asia would be a point to do? Like, why people would be triggered or having the risk to go there?
Well, Southeast Asia is an emerging economy. If you look at ASEAN itself, when we talk about Southeast Asia, you're talking 13, 14 of the, predominantly the fastest growing economies in the world. Relatively stable and relatively, good places to live, good places to do business, highly populated, smart populations. Like it's a growing. It's got all the mix of the next place, the place to be. You look at the Vietnams, Malaysia, more developed market, maybe like Singapore, Indonesia. These are upper middle income countries that are really looking to get into that next wave to become the developed destinations of the future. So personally, for me, Southeast Asia, coming from Africa, I always thought Southeast Asia is 2 chapters or a chapter, if not so a chapter ahead of Africa. So it was a strategic decision for me to be in a place and experience the development of a country firsthand and see how quickly or how rapidly things can change. And compare it with what's happening, back in my market, and see what value I can extract from being immersed within what's going on here.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that you mentioned is what is going on here.
Yeah.
People may ask about why I choose to come to this region besides acquiring the skills, was to see how was the financial technology market going on. Because when you see highly regulated places like in the US, they actually have a huge setback when they talk about crypto economies,
Yeah.
smart contracts, or all the other companies that they want to go ahead. And here in this region, you see a more opening door to the point that there is opportunity not only to explore but also to take risks that are ahead at least maybe 5 or 10 years into the line. So that's one of the things I've been trying also to understand how those can be either implemented or improved if there are certain roadblocks that can generate problems. Did you know that, for example, in the US, there is only one state, the state of Wyoming, that you can open your company without having no problems from legal tenders or the like of it?
I did not know.
Yeah, because the other places, like if you go to California, all of a sudden you will have like the FDIC trying to ask you like, do you have this, back it up or
Yeah.
not, or who is actually in control of this?
Yeah.
And then you hit roadblocks, legal roadblocks, because the more regulated a market is, also the roadblocks to actually make you prosper,
Yes.
unless you find a way. And it's fascinating to see in this region. Look at that. They are actually discussing to make it either more open or
Yeah.
the regulations clearer, which is always more important.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting observation. With just you being in the states and coming from Texas, what have been the interesting or with regards to just financial markets? What have been the distinctions that you've made between how finances are maybe handled, or the culture, or of how finance or crypto, the stuff that you're into, between here and in Texas?
So I saw there are certain hubs in Texas, like let's say Austin, that people can actually start experimenting with, for example, crypto and cannabis.
Yeah.
Because there are certain regulations that allows you to get certain products to have their place. But in the end, tax regulation comes and bites them by the time the year ends.
Yeah.
So I saw more people trying to get into stocks or into the crypto coins, but they cannot either sell them because they have to pay taxes. So
Yes.
they have to quote themselves, they have diamond hands, they hold their coins, but they see they get the earnings on paper, but they cannot cash them at all. Or if they cash them, sometimes they will lose their identity they built upon. Like the
Yes.
famous influencer called Brought the Dodge, that he wanted only to hold Dogecoin, but even if he was winning $2 million in paper, he couldn't cash it because he wanted to win more.
Yeah.
Until he realized that if he wanted to cash the money, he will also start to lose part of the perceived identity.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, you will see a lot of incubators, and there is a lot of Elon Musk men and women out there. The problem is they don't have access to the right amount of capital. And if they have the access to capital, let's say angel investors or venture capitalists, they have to make a compromise on the percentage of equity.
Yeah.
So that's why you don't see the story of Elon Musk repeated many times.
Yeah.
Because it's not part of a trend, it's part of an outlier,
Yes.
a very well designed outlier that was backed up by private money, private wealth, even their own family.
Yeah.
And not many people have actually the access to do that. That's
Yeah.
maybe one of the fallacies that you don't see. And here, at least in the region from what I saw, I remember the talk of Nathan Peterson talking about IDEO helping Tokyo and Japan to make a city of startups, a country for startups. The issue is not about the startups. The issue is like those startups can fund themselves into the future.
Yeah.
Because when an angel investor or a venture capitalist put money, they realize it's a expected or maybe a little overvalued narrative that the entrepreneurs are selling.
Yeah.
The people who put the money, they know that more likely than not, that entrepreneurship is going to fail.
Yeah.
So the only way they get money is from the companies they invest, and maybe from 10, 1 or 2, they get the money back. And that's
Yeah.
how they can put all the other stuff. I'm not sure how is the percentage here, but it's like when you get your medicine and you have to know about the benefits and also
Yes.
the side effects.
Yes.
That will help a lot, especially here, because what
Yeah.
you see here is like the wave of people trying to get into this
Yeah.
without knowing the collateral effects.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you, and maybe I want to maybe push the conversation a little bit. My first action learning project was with the Green Tech Malaysia corporation, and they were trying to start basically an incubator for early stage entrepreneurs to just give them access to funding. And there's a phenomena that I want to maybe speak about that I saw in this. I think it's probably worldwide, but maybe more pronounced in emerging markets. You have governments really trying to support early stage entrepreneurs because that's where jobs are created. So you have a lot of grant money coming from government and in a way free cash. And entrepreneurs have all this access and to this cash. But I do feel that some of the entrepreneurial spirit of bootstrapping, ideating, making sure having your own skin in the game, is kind of lost by all these structures. And then what you happen is you have entrepreneurs with half-baked ideas, entrepreneurs who are not really artificially committed to their businesses. And then there's now this new concept of entrepreneurs who are just burning money really fast, and their real job is really just being grantrepreneurs, which is a term that was coined here to just go for grant after grant after grant. And the business itself, or the problem itself that the business is trying to solve, goes nowhere. Now, how do those businesses come out of what we quote unquote here is the nailing stage? How do you get there if the institutional structures are such that it's become, in a sense, there's more upside on taking more loans on the financial side than actually growing organically and making sure your business runs?
Yes, that reminds me an analogy of the chicken and the pork.
Yeah.
Let's explain. A chicken and a pork are in a kitchen, and they want to show to the cook how committed they are.
Yeah.
So the kitchen only puts the egg, and the pork has to put the ham.
Yeah.
All of those are committed, but one is more committed than other.
Yeah.
The same happens here because there the possibility to say you are committed to an idea, but you only need minimum effort to say I'm committed. Whereas other entrepreneurs, they say that they have been committed because they already put the fundings or they wanted to put their philosophy. But if we want to see a different variable, and people can also start to check in on us, like intellectual property. There was something I wanted to discuss with Marwan in an emergency podcast when he put the message that he was leaving, because some people asked that he knew a little about intellectual property. Because if you are an immigrant and you put here an idea that goes up and goes big, how can you protect your idea for you instead of like somebody who is local can take it on their own? So maybe that would be another issue. But number three, and answering the main question as how to make a product that actually solves an issue. Financial incentives will always be something that will go not only for the owner of the idea, but also whoever is working with the owner in that flat organization in the small scale, and then until the bigger scale, which is from the, people call it nail it to scale it. In that problems of scale, people will start to get out or get in, the turnover rate, because some people, some companies, some ideas maybe last 1 year or 2 years, 3 years, and then they start to move on. And how committed they are to this. Are they getting more options to go working somewhere else, or is the financial package that they receive from these venture capitalists or the angels good enough? Which reminds me of a quote: a human being is only as loyal as the options are to them. So that's why you see most of these ideas that are at the beginning, they are only good narratives, and they will only go as long as they face the first roadblock.
That's it.
Either legal or financial, or either from the customer. So that's on them. It's not on me or whoever is watching. Please come to us to discuss more about this. That's what is going on. And then you see the case of the serial entrepreneurs who are always going
Yeah.
to new. Maybe it's because they like to do entrepreneurship, or maybe
Yeah.
number two, they get better financial rewards doing that and actually going
Yeah.
to the next stage.
Yeah. I personally have no problems with serial entrepreneurs, if I could say, as long as you're solving the problems. Entrepreneurship at the heart of it should be is the art or the science of problem solving. Solving problems that the market the market accepts. If you forward a solution and you set a price on it and the market accepts it and says this is a valuable solution, I would pay a price for it. That's the true test of what your entrepreneurship is. So if you're a serial entrepreneur and you are habitually and frequently solving problems that the market accepts, then I'd say you're a real serial entrepreneur. But if you're going from, I'd say half baked to half baked to half baked, I'd say you're still trying to figure it out. So sometimes I think these two distinctions also need to be made, because we saw with our action learning project that the data of those that go from grant to grant to grant, not all of them actually have viable ideas. So you ask yourself, these guys are actually burning through money and committed to, or emotionally committed to solving problems that the market just doesn't accept. So we could talk about it for days, but unfortunately, this is, I'm sure it's not just in Malaysia, it's something that's just part of the entrepreneurship ecosystem.
Yeah, because then you have the grifters.
Yes.
They are only here for the easy money, the lowest stage money.
Yeah.
Then they move to another region to do another ideas, and then they go as far as nobody notices them. Like the story, you remember the episode of The Simpsons with the guy with the monorail, the electrical monorail, was trying to sell the idea like the monorail can go there.
Yeah.
He was a serial entrepreneur on his own until Lisa realized, wait a second, he did the same in other cities and nothing changed.
Yeah.
Things like that. But okay, those serial entrepreneurs that are in discussion, you know who you are. So now, from entrepreneurship, and we discussed this a little at the beginning of the talk, because it can be visible that you are wearing something from Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Yeah. MBA. Where the
Yeah.
passion for MBA started in?
Growing up, my parents are from the Congo. So growing up, every time I watched basketball, I would watch. I started with just seeing Mukembe Mutombo. So I thought, yo, this guy has a similar story like mine, and I love just watching him play. Then I'm a '90s kid. Then there was Michael Jordan. Watched every Chicago Bulls game that I could. Unfortunately, we had no ESPN, so we would watch like games which are maybe a week late. And the love for it just grew with the passion that the guys had on the field, and it was a great game to watch. I love the diversity in the game, and it was just one of those things that was there. So that's where the passion for for basketball came. I would say I wouldn't consider myself a hardcore sports fan, but I'd say in my earlier years it was really basketball or soccer, football. So that was kind of my experiences. So I don't have like a set team, like where I'm committed, So it's gone from kind of how I've grown, from Chicago Bulls to the LA Lakers when Kobe was there. I just love the game. I like watching it. Miami Heat when Shaq was there. The Cavaliers. I just like watching really good basketball. And so I have my own personal tradition that anytime someone wins the league, I buy a jersey. So and it just happened to be that this one happens to be from Milwaukee, Bucks. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Such a long story for Milwaukee Bucks to go not only for the conference finals, but actually to win an NBA championship.
Yeah.
Because they were ups and downs. Back in the 2018 season when they faced the Kawhi Leonards and the Raptors, they were that close and then they couldn't, and then finally they overcome the hump after beating the Suns. So it's a big story, and also for Giannis, which is like the new wave of talent going into the league.
I think he's had a great season, and he's been a great player. And that's what I love about basketball. It's really a game of champions, because you see the disappointments, you see the guys try hard, and then you see them try hard again the next season. And it's always nice to see the hard work pay off. You see the guys like Giannis how they started, the disappointments that they faced, the ups, the downs, and then to finally get to have that taste of victory is always nice to see. And I think those emotions are just displayed in a sense that is a little more intense than it is in other sports. I know sports it's probably like that with all sports, ups and downs. But with basketball, you feel a lot more connected to the journey than I would say to maybe other team sports like, well, my personal opinion, like soccer or even like a cricket. Yeah.
It is. Sometimes the narrative helps you to understand why a player needs to win a certain day or a certain journey, or the biggest disappointment that you would see when a player couldn't make it and get a championship.
Yeah.
Which is totally different from when you choose these same players for the Olympics.
Yeah.
Because for the Olympics, it's like usually Team USA always wins, but then you have these once every time in a while teams that got such an generational talent, and they happen to win gold, like Argentina back in 2006 or Athens 2004.
2004,
Or the other ones. It's so rare to find those.
Yeah.
There is a saying I remember, like for some people it is better to win an NBA championship than to win gold.
Yeah.
Because everybody wins gold in Team USA, but very few are NBA champions.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we have to start valuing a player based on their journey and also the talent, because there is a lot of talent that never won a championship.
Yeah.
Talking about talent,
Yeah.
how do you see the journey that you are taking right now towards the later part of 2022? Like, we know that we come here to get skills, and then there is a new chapter coming forward.
Yeah.
What do you see right there in that eventual opening?
For now, I'm really focused on the services industry, and I'm starting to develop a passion for e-commerce. So personally, for me, I think it be platforms, marketplaces. I want to get those skills. If that's what you're asking. Get the skills and talents that at least allow me to participate in that. I mentioned that this is a year of experimentation, so I'm not totally committed or say this is what I'm going to do. But I'm thinking, is it Alice in Wonderland? Is the same way, like you just follow the yellow brick road. So as I get every brick by brick, that's where I'm going, and it just seems like that's the direction. The platforms and e-commerce, that services industries, is where the yellow brick road looks like it's going, and I'm for it. I'm going there.
Yeah. In my side, I've been trying to make a shift not only from oil and gas, but also back in 2018, I happened to win a hackathon using blockchain.
Okay.
And then I realized that clients began to ask me more about projects in blockchain,
Yes.
most likely focused for oil and gas than traditional oil and gas engineering.
Yes.
So I began to see a little shift that maybe I can take upon, but more skills were needed.
Yeah.
And then not only skills, but meta manus, which is hands at the job, trying to get more practice through the action learning.
Yeah.
And then I realized, okay, that can be done. The previous action learning was using to refine the policy for environmental social governance. the
Yeah.
ESG, that
Yeah.
are so hardcore discussed in the oil and gas.
Yeah.
But we happen to realize that through learning by doing,
Yeah.
you identify the good ESG from the real scam ones.
Yeah.
So that's a skill that right now each of the members of our team can say, yes, we have.
Yeah.
So not only skills, but also in the practice, to get into the financial technology, into the blockchain technology.
Yeah.
That happens to be one of the reasons I wanted to push for president of the finance club.
Yeah.
So we have some events moving on, but getting to that and experiment what they need, experiment what are the initial solutions and the
Yeah.
possible outcomes to get things doing.
Yeah.
Who knows, maybe carbon trading, maybe decarbonization for oil and gas, or trying to trade carbon tokens. That would be one part for oil and gas. But then, and blockchain as a large will be like the full embracement of the ecosystem for digital trading, for digital commerce, digital banking, that will allow people to not only have their own money flowing,
Yeah.
but also the decentralized version.
Yeah.
Instead of being from a centralized bank, to actually have their options to put their money at their own positions.
Yeah. See, I've always wanted to ask you, what's your opinion on NFTs? You know, being from a traditionally more conservative part of finance, I've noted the trend, and I have noted the hype, but I've never had the conversations with someone who knows probably a little more about blockchain technology and the inner workings of it, and just find out their
Mhm.
opinions. What do you think?
There is a quote: when your grandma starts talking about Dogecoin, the hype is already gone.
Yeah.
The money is already gone.
Yeah.
And when you saw that everybody start talking about NFTs, it's because most of the money is already done. What it's trying to do is just to capitalize on the little momentum that is left. So, with that in mind, digital art was always there,
Yeah.
but the problem was how to trade it.
Yes.
Or there is a quote in America like, you are only worth as much as someone is willing to pay.
Yeah.
So, with that in mind, when you put an NFT, you have to expect maybe the price of the market will be one Ethereum or half an Ethereum,
Yeah.
and people just want to buy it because they may have so much liquidity that they don't know what to buy, or
Yeah.
because they cannot leave their houses, they want to start investing in the metaverse, or they cannot buy homes because the price of homes is so high
Yeah.
to the point that even if you get the loan, a very high interest rate, you still have to put a deposit, and sometimes you don't have the liquidity to put the cash deposit. They start to put in another asset that may have the opportunity to go up.
Yeah.
So digital art usually has a value which comes from somebody that is a well-renowned artist.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, that some of those high-priced NFT tokens can have like an experiential part of it. Like Golden State Warriors, they were issuing many of those, but the most expensive give you the opportunity to have a golden ring given to you at halftime at their stadium. It gives you an experience.
Yeah.
But number three, price of rent. You can collect as many pieces of art, but then where are you going to put it? And rent can be too expensive. So that can be the flexibility to keep it on your phone and show it.
Yeah.
It's a good experiment to see how the market is trying to test what we are saying,
Yeah.
the transition towards a Web3,
Yeah.
which is the next version of internet.
Yeah.
But then we have to also remind ourselves, like, as we have retail money getting into this, institutional money is also trying to get their way into. Like
Yeah.
Metaverse and all those other companies wants to put money there. All of a sudden you have the same old money from the past, buying virtual jets, buying virtual real estate,
Yeah.
and then you find yourself again in the same problem,
Yeah.
which reminds us of the issue that legacy funding wants to solve. Because
Yes.
if you develop the skills, you will avoid ending on the same generations after.
Of course.
So, the non-fungible tokens can have an opportunity to disrupt as long as they find a purpose for either the service they want to provide and also the trading. Because a lot of people put in a lot of dollars or a lot of currency, and they couldn't even resell it.
Yeah.
Because nobody is willing to pay more than that.
Yeah.
Personally, I have some from people that I actually met, because I know their story.
Yeah.
Actually, one of those is going to be, and I'm going to be on the record, you know who you are, that we're going to post our interview that we did months ago
Yeah.
to be part of the unlockable content.
Yeah.
So this artist actually sold me an NFT, but the problem is the physical art, I couldn't come. And then face problems with immigration, like, wait a second, is this a piece of art that you wanted to get into here? You know that kind of thing cannot be here. So maybe a different take can be done, and we decided to do a podcast episode to put it like the added value.
Yes.
So we can remember, okay, we did that.
You know, I've had foggy understanding when it comes to blockchain and NFTs. Anything on the blockchain, my understanding has always been foggy with regards to ownership. So I, like many other people, got my first experience with blockchain by basically buying on a marketplace. I won't mention the names, one of the big three, I would say, that I bought on. And one of my realizations was anytime I wanted to make withdrawal for actual cash money, or to realize some of the value that had been accumulated with my digital currency, I was taken maybe for a little bit of a loop. You know, like, I'm not allowed to do this, I'm not allowed to take out this much or whatnot. So it made me think, do I actually own this if I don't have access to it when and if I want?
That's a good insight, because what we are discussing here is public keys or private keys.
Yeah.
There are certain apps that work like brokers. Like, you put the money and they help you to the trading, but they hold the token.
Yeah.
That happens with Robinhood, the famous case with GameStop, that people wanted to get their money back, but they hold them. The same happens with crypto coins, because there is a model. If you don't hold the keys, you don't hold the coins.
Yeah.
That is very important, because by the time you want to capitalize at a certain moment in the market, okay, if I have my own private keys, then I can cash it whenever I want.
Yeah.
Few people have access to private keys.
So how do you get access to private keys? Now that's the question.
Yes, there are certain retailers that actually are selling you the hard or the cold storages, because the hard keys are like a passwords stored in USBs that are connected to a way or a shape of a hard drive that has to be kept in a certain temperature so it can keep running.
Okay.
Because that's the only way you can access to the big ledger of blockchain, and to say, I have my wallet, I have my private key, and I want to use it so I can cash it and trade it as soon as possible. The brokers or these apps usually have a framework already big, like the big ship, ready to execute.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that actually are going to hold it, because they give money, or they take money based on the volume per 24 hours.
Yeah.
So they are never negative.
Okay.
So that's one of the main things that are actually happening to them. But because if you have the keys, it doesn't matter. It's like you go to an ATM and you withdraw the money.
Yeah.
That's the main problem. There are not so many access to get those private keys. And if you have one, then you have to keep it in a cold storage.
Okay.
Which is one of the things that people are starting to suggest.
Yeah.
If they are getting into Bitcoin mining or Dogecoin mining or Ethereum mining, coins that use proof of work, because you need to solve a mathematical problem to get a reward.
Yeah.
There's going to be a limit on your cap of processing, that you cannot get as much rewards as before. So they want to use the same structure to start using cold storage.
Yeah.
That's what is going on. Some people are starting just to realize they can also get money from the cold storage. Just keeping there like on a freezer, and let's say your wallets or your keys are like the cans that you want to put in your fridge, and they just keep it because, okay, that's the best way, because there are not so many cold storage available.
Yeah. Got it. I'd like to possibly pick your brain a little more about that. Maybe that's a story for another day.
Absolutely, because that's one of the things that we wanted to incorporate into the fintech discussions, It's like we have people that's been already playing with ledgers, brokerage,
Yeah.
or how to keep lending money based on the blockchain opportunities
Yeah.
that are actually occurring in the region. And it's like, well, people would love to know more. Or number two, about how to identify a good project from a scam one. Because
Yeah.
you have seen a lot of influencers trying to pump and certain coin, and then all of a sudden it goes down. But everybody loses money except the first one, because they changed something in the code, the whale rule. Like when you have somebody with a lot of coins, that's a whale. The purpose of a whale is to get caught, but they changed the line in the code so the whale can, instead of waiting 24 hours, only can wait 1 minute, and they start cashing their money before everybody realizes. So those are the main issues that happens with the blockchain pumps and dumps.
Yeah.
I'm very glad that we got the opportunity to talk today.
Yeah.
How people can find you?
Well, I'm available on social media like most people. I tend to be a private person, so if you want to find me, just send a message and I'll probably add you on Instagram. Most likely LinkedIn is where you'd find me. I'm not really on social media. No TikTok, no Facebook, unfortunately.
It's all right.
Yeah.
And any piece of advice for the younger Norris? If you can give a little of advice to the younger self, which one would be?
To my younger self, that's a good question. I would say stick to your guns. I would say I'm proud of you for staying curious. And advice that I'd give you is be patient. Take it easy. It's all gonna work out.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm very glad that we got the opportunity to talk, Norris.
Thank you for your time, man.
Take care, brother.
Glad to have been on your podcast.
Well, folks, stay safe out there, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye.
Bye.